For a Justice League story, you have to have a good villain.
We just got a message from the Fatal Five.
Bruce was saying that he didn't want to do a movie where the Justice League sort of plowed through faceless parademons, that he wanted very specific, unique opponents for them to face, and the Fatal Five fit the bill.
A lot of DC fans, myself included, love the Legion of Superheroes. And when the Fatal Five came up, we said, well, this is a great way for us to do a Justice League story, but bring in some great cameos from the Legionnaires that we love so much.
This story, specifically, I think, it's the characters that really drew me into it.
It's exciting to see these young teenagers in their setting and in their world kind of battling an enemy that they have been battling for years, and we just kind of jump right to that.
Great row.
One of the first things that we did when Jim and I sat down with Eric to kind of start beating out the story in broad strokes was to decide which characters we were going to use. And we knew straight up that we were going to use Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. They're always kind of like, you know, a gimme.
Nothing like me.
And then we cast Kevin Conroy and Susan Eisenberg and George Newbern as the big three, just because I love working with them. I hadn't used them in a while as the team, so I was like, okay, let's do that.
You all right, son?
Those are the voices I hear when I open a comic book. Those are the definitive versions of the characters to me.
You've got what it takes, Jessica.
But also, I think there's a conscious decision to try to introduce new characters. Bruce and a lot of the people that sort of, you know, were with him on Batman the Animated Series, I think they're almost like these comic book historians. Their knowledge of comics is very broad.
I think every DC geek out there has an ideal Justice League roster in their heads that they've come up with, and when Bruce Timm and Alan Burnett and Jim Krieg were like, we need to come up with a Justice League lineup, I thought immediately, like, okay, this is what you've been training for. Like, you have put a lot of thought into what your Justice League lineup would be.
I think it was Eric again who had suggested Mr. Terrific, and it's like, oh yeah, Mr. Terrific, of course.
I'm in heaven. I love a challenge.
He's not the smartest man in the world, he's the third smartest man, but he's certainly the smartest guy in the Justice League.
He was in Justice League Unlimited. I always liked the character, and we never really did enough with him, I think, in the old show. So it was kind of good to get him actually out in the field.
Miss Martian we just liked. Miss Martian is fun.
You know what? I'm getting a mochaccino.
We knew she'd make a good foil for Batman.
Killed it. Team Supreme.
And then there's Jessica Cruz, who we pretty early on landed on as our main character, as our lead.
Jessica's story in particular I find really fascinating. It's always interesting to me to see a character who is not necessarily a reluctant superhero, but somebody who doesn't just like, you know, have the superhero thing thrust upon them and they're just like, okay, yeah, let's go fight crime, you know? I mean, she's really ambivalent about it because she's got like almost crippling anxiety. She can barely leave the house. And it's like, wow, that's something you don't usually see in a superhero.
I remember being thrilled when we had Diane Guerrero come in to record for her first session, and she just kind of gave me this wide-eyed look of, this girl, in a sense to where I think she could really relate to some of the struggles and some of the inner demons that Jessica had.
There was something about Jessica that felt very personal and very intimate and very vulnerable, and still powerful and still managing, that she is working at something that we thought was really relatable. One of the early things that Jim Krieg and I bonded over was we both were just obsessed with and loved the Legion of Superheroes, and Starboy was a mutual favorite.
Eric absolutely said, oh, we need to use Starboy. And I think that he has a great emotional arc, and it should be really satisfying.
This character is struggling with keeping his grip on reality due to not having a prescription or medicine that he would have in his own time.
That's not great.
As he comes back to our time, you see someone who's so capable start to lose his faculties. It's really quite tragic.
He definitely has troubles. I mean, he has manic modes and memory problems and severe trouble with staying focused on things in the present.
Elias Cabell brought so much of the humor and I think likable side to Thomas Keller and Starboy.
Mind if I join you? It's Starboy, right?
Starboy is this nurturing element to Jessica, and she's a calming force for him as well.
Oh, it's so hard. I can't think. I can't remember.
They're kind of like dealing with their own thing, and you know, they don't feel like anybody understands them. But somehow, when they're together, they sort of comfort and support each other.
A lot of times in superhero stories, mental illness can get ascribed to villains. Like Batman's Rogues Gallery is kind of the big example of this. But here we had a chance to take two neuroatypical people and destigmatize it and have them find each other and help each other and, you know, kind of get out of their way and not act as if they're damaged in some way and just let them be heroes. And I think that was really fun for all of us to do and tackle.
They both need each other to overcome their problems and kind of rise above their own personal challenges in order to face the ultimate evil.
On this project, you know, we had a lot of comic book history to draw on, but we didn't have any source material we were directly adapting, which is liberating, but also kind of terrifying. And so at one point, I had a stack this high of Legion of Superheroes omnibuses to pull from, and we started drawing inspiration from Jim Shooter, who created the Fatal Five.
The Fatal Five came up, and it's like, oh, I always liked the Fatal Five. And they have a cool name, and they have a cool look.
We all, you know, collectively on this movie loved stories where the heroes face obstacles, but so do the villains. I think it makes you weirdly find yourself rooting for the supervillains.
Come to me, my love. Free me.
We'd kind of forgotten how ridiculously powerful they are, and that made for a real challenge in setting up a story where even the Justice League would be a threat against them, because you have Mano who actually blew up his entire planet just by touching it.
They're deadly. Persuader has an axe that basically is sharpened to less than a nanometer thickness, and so it can cut through anything, basically.
You have, you know, Theric, who can be the Fatal Five's hacker and bomb maker and resident genius, and you start to get into these conversations, you know, who's smarter, Mr. Terrific or Theric? And you have, you know, Validus, who can shoot lightning from his brain because comic books are awesome, but is also strong enough to go toe-to-toe with Superman. And you have Emerald Empress, their leader, the scariest one, who has the Emerald Eye of Ekron that she wields, which is sort of this weapon of unspeakable power that sort of works in similar ways to a Green Lantern power ring. And so you had just all of these great characters to pull from and wonder about what dynamics they'd have with the different Justice Leaguers. The Legion of Superheroes, even when things get really bad for them, they represent a distinctly utopian vision of the future. They are a promise that we'll still be here in 1,000 years.
They're teenagers. All of them. It's like your worst nightmare.
They're easier to relate to because you feel like, oh, that would be me. If I had powers, I would be a member of the Legion. It's almost hard to imagine being a member of the Justice League, but as the Legion, that feels doable, you know?
You are scary.
The Legion of Superheroes is just chock full of characters like Starboy who can kind of show us that the kids are all right.
Whoa.
I think emotionally it's a very fulfilling story.
I told you I was a superhero.